the screening, of course, is quite intense. So let's just try and concentrate a bit longer. Karolin, you worked usually in your work as you're a writer. You make video performances. You perform yourself on camera, and you explore the relationship between you and the camera. That is between you, who's speaking, and the audience you speak to, and the room you're doing it in. Now, in this film, I was very surprised that you work with an actress, Cécile Chou, was an untrained actress, but she's acted actually in a couple of feature films. She's based in Berlin. So could you talk a little bit about how this came about? You working with this, very charismatic actress. I think she really grabs your attention. She really can fill the frame. So can you just talk a little bit about how the... yeah, you can take that. How that shift in your practice started.
First, hello and thank you for inviting me to the screening. Where do I start? Actually, as Maxa said, I often perform myself in front of the camera and often addressing the audience also, and delivering a text or trying to explain something. But I think it was always very important that to have the frame in my mind, that I could leave the frame, and in a way that there's a 360 degree around the camera. So there's an actual camera, but maybe a person behind the camera or not. But the camera also is kind of the future audience. So in a way, it was always a kind of dialogue. And so I was thinking, what can I do when I want to work with an actor or actress, and that I didn't want to just replace myself and put an alter ego in front of the camera and she could speak my text, but to be more conscious of this situation itself, and also then to reflect the work of the actress then again, and also our relationship. And then I could help with a feature film of a friend, Stefan Gene, who made a film called Umsonst, and we were doing this casting together, though I have to say it was not a normal casting. It was not, we were not inviting people and putting them into this situation that she's describing, but we were just meeting her and talking. But I was also looking at many of these videos that actors have online, and especially young actors often make these videos to present themselves, like a promotion video, because they don't have so much material. So I was interested in this, how do you make this image of yourself, and to perform your skills, how many languages you speak, if you can dance, or what kind of things you can do. And and then I got to know her better through the film shoot, and then I asked her if we could make a couple of sessions where I would ask her questions. And actually it's also interesting how she used the situation, that it's in a way not really, in a way she's not talking to the camera, she's ignoring the camera, she's using me as her film partner, in a way, and this is where she gets her energy from, and I think this makes this relation between before and behind the camera.
Because you're using actress because you want to highlight the, let's just call it for now, artificiality of speaking to the camera. Like right now in the moment I'm speaking to you, but at the same time the question is, how far am I performing, or where's my thoughts are simultaneously with what I'm speaking. So in a way, you intensify your interest in the question of who's speaking actually when I'm speaking. And do you find that in a world where as you say, on YouTube and advertising, we're so surrounded by the speech act towards the camera, which is always at the end, in a way, trying to sell yourself. Let's just argue for that right now. So is that an incentive for you to question the relationship between the performative self and the self in your work?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, obviously, I'm more interested in finding a very abstract language for that, and not making a work about social media, but or how we use it. But I think there is something interesting for me. That is how do we use techniques, and what do we think is a technique? Is this something that is seen as something negative because it keeps us from something more authentic, or I would rather say there is no escape from that anyway, and it's even interesting to see it as that you can use a technique and you can play with that, and that there is not the aim to come to naturalism, but more to see the reality of the circumstances that you're working in. And this is, of course, this acting method that she's describing, which she learned in a workshop, is a metaphor, of course, for that, because it's in a way a method in order to appear more natural or authentic. And it's actually a Sanford-Meisner technique that she's describing. And also the part at the end that where you only hear her voice and there's no image and it's very fast. It's actually something that we played together. We made the exercise together, and it's an exercise where you repeat the sentence of the other very quickly, and you only change you and I, and it's an exercise in order to forget acting, so that you're very fast and expressed it in a different way. And so we played this game, and then I took away my voice. So, but you can still, of course, feel the dialogue, or that there is a you and an I, and there is a kind of tension or power game between them.
Yeah, and that's also the moment, one of my favorite moments in the film, where the relationship between her and us, now sitting here, becomes more clear, because we don't see her, she doesn't look at anyone, she doesn't look at you, she doesn't look at the camera, so it's like she's playing this game with us, and so you're extending her address towards you directly to us. But I really like the idea of you're saying, the notion of authenticity is broken anyway, and you're not interested between, the opposites that we're so used to in Western philosophy, the kind of oppositional dualism between fiction and reality, for example, but that the authentic or the reality is already always broken, and you're just dissecting certain variations of that brokenness and rearrange them, and that becomes that plays out in your artwork. The idea of the self not being the authentic self when he or she or it speaks is also really relevant in your film. Maybe we can hand over the microphone. Pauline, and I just wanted to ask you first again about the starting point for this film, which is inspired by a text of a French writer and theorist, Edouard Glissant. Your film is called Opacity, Opaque. So could you maybe explore this, or just briefly introduce that to the audience, because it's a very theoretical text, not everybody might know it.
Yeah, I can say a few words about it. It was one of the starting points for this project. We were very interested in this figure of opacity, Glissant was a poet and a writer from the French Caribbean, and he demanded the right for opacity for everybody. He said we must fight against transparency everywhere. And with that, he was meaning that this was a kind of a critique of the colonial project, that you can, research who is the other, that you can understand the other, that you can make the other transparent. And I guess it's questions that are relevant for all of us. It's very simple questions: where do you come from? Questions about your body, about your ability. In this film, we were also interested in this group that, like this idea of being maybe not possible, of not being able to be filmed because you are underground, because you are politically active. And that was kind of one of the starting points, this idea of opacity. And we were interested, how can we formulate that in a film with visual elements? So obviously one of our ideas was with this curtain, that you have a curtain and then you open the curtain, but it doesn't reveal anything. It reveals another curtain, which is to be opened.
And could you explain a little bit more the difference between being opaque and being invisible?
That's a good question. I think it's not about not being visible. What Glissant was claiming for, he was claiming for a certain kind of visibility that is maybe not understandable, that withdraws from understandability.
And then in the second part of the film, you quote Genet. This is when the ventriloquist act kicks in, the Bauchrednerei, that's a complicated English word. The text by Jean Genet, and describes the perfect enemy.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we start working on different projects, very often we have like this in different ideas that interest us and that are not necessarily directly connected. And as we were working on this notion of opacity, we came across the text of Jean Genet, The Declared Enemy, and I guess something was really appealing in that text, because it kind of tries to blur this idea between the self and the other, or the friend and the enemy. And we kind of wanted to use this material with our performers, and we're also really interested in, a lot of drag performances, you use a song from the past, for example, and make connection to that song and use lip syncing. And we were interested to try and work with this method of drag, lip syncing, but with like a political text.
Which then leads me to the next question about the decor. There's really extravagant references to the pink, the jaguar pink, the glitter, the fingernails, even the cigarette was a Pink Panther. I mean, it's reference to the disco 70s or the 80s.
Yeah. I don't know what to say exactly. I mean, we work. Well, obviously, there's this idea of camouflage that was interesting for us in relationship to opacity, because we wanted Ginger Brooks Takahashi to wear the same color as the curtain and make this reference to a certain kind of queer camouflage. And I don't know. It's
interesting because
it's kind of assemblage, Werner Hirsch. We just found this picture of like diamonds and leather, and it sounded right.
It's such a striking element, but Right, at this point, let me think. Do you have any comments to each other?
I saw the film the second time, but this first time in the cinema, and it was struck me much more how this Aufgänge and Abgänge, like this going on stage and disappearing, it was much stronger here, entering the screen and taking this space maybe, and but then always with this moment of failure, or you do not really know when it starts, or was that the right shoot, or was that the wrong shoot, but then you used that, and I think that was very interesting also that with this that things don't match, or these different layers.
Well, I think that's something that interests us, continuously in a lot of our projects. What is exactly the frame, and what is off frame, and when does the performance exactly start, and when does it end, and so it's nice that it's maybe it has to do with projected in a cinema that makes it different than having it in the installation. But
Let me see if we have any questions from the audience. Questions to the artist, to me, comments about the program in general. Yes, over there. Do we have a roaming mic? Yes. It's because we're recording this.
I just have a quick question for Ms. Meunier. Is that correct? Yes. I noticed with your film that there didn't seem to be a tremendous amount of effort to control the sound during the actual shoot. You had a lot of diegetic, very natural sound like it was a casting. And so it makes the dropouts that much more remarkable. And I just wanted to ask how conscious a decision that was, if you played at all with more controlled sound or eliminating static or anything like that, so as to highlight the voice when she was speaking and make the dropouts less stark. What was the process for choosing that?
I think I tried to create a rhythm also on the sound level. Also obviously it's kind of disconnected, and so I tried to make these breaks in between, and but then also to have the sound of the space still, and I think if you mean if why I didn't exclude also the space, or
Why
in the sound, I mean.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
Perhaps she wasn't individually mic'd, or you weren't individually mic'd, to eliminate some of the...
I mean, she was individually mic'd, and so it was just I think to create also the space, and to have still this intimacy. I mean, also that you hear when she's touching her shirt or something. So it's and to work with this a little bit, and actually there are some points where I took the original sound away and put just some atmo below, because there's one scene where she's listening to me, but you don't hear me talking. So this is totally artificial in a way, the whole sound layer.
We have time, so. Do you have one? Was that a hand up? Or did you scratch your head? Scratch his head. Any other comments about the rest of the film? Like, don't like? Put your hands up in the air like you just don't care. There you go, yes.
One question to Pauline. I could have asked it later, but why not now? You are the three of you are talking about artificiality, and especially in Pauline and Renate's film. I was wondering, how do you see the fact that you are using all these symbols of artificiality, like this colorful smoke, all these glitter and costumes, fake elements coming from the drag culture, the lips syncing voice and so on, and yet at the same time doing all this in a kind of cinema verite that gives all the way, revealing all the way.
The means of production.
Yeah, and all the way these artifices are produced and set up, and it's a little. Karolin, it's a little bit the same for you because you're also using the traditional blue box, so to speak, but yet you are of course showing a little bit that it's in a real space, and so I was interested a little bit to question you on how this duality functions in your in the construction.
I mean, it's true that this moment of revealing the means of production, or of making like the performers very aware of the camera, or there's always moments where also in other films where the performers will directly look at the camera, or will fall out of their role, or the clap is always very present in our films, which is like kind of enhances the moment where it's supposed to start, or you always see something before, so it's always about what I was saying before, like what is the moment where you start to perform, and is there a difference between this moment and before or after, and or also maybe the off stage is a place also that is really interesting for us to to reveal. I mean, I wouldn't talk about artificiality necessarily, but I think what is really interesting for us is this moment of performance, and this moment of having like working with these people who have a very who are very conscious of placing themselves in front of the camera, and of who is behind the camera, and this is also maybe because I mean here it's kind of strange to see also the film not in a loop, because usually we show it in a loop and maybe with some objects around it, and when we show it in exhibitions, it's also very often important for us to think about how the viewer is going to interact with the installation, and also become conscious of their own position regarding the screen, or regarding some kind of situation in the room that is kind of a stage. And so I think it's very often about also this consciousness of being present in a room and in front of other people, and but yeah, I'm not sure it's about. I'm not sure it's very productive for us to think about authentic or artificial somehow. It's not really. I don't think it, but.
But maybe it's maybe the connection is what kind of roles are provided, and what is if you're next to this or something like that, and or what I think what's interesting for me is to think of templates as something that is pre-formatted, stereotypes as something positive and negative at the same time. So you can learn them, you can use them apply them, but on the other hand, then it's also something that maybe fixes you, and maybe your film is more about the camouflage tactic, but also being maybe showing a different image that is not normative or so, and and showing the means of production, or maybe this is even too much. Maybe this is not even what you are doing and what I'm doing, but it's more like showing. It's also about the image that you're creating with showing this. It's also a very specific image that you are producing when you show suddenly the swimming pool and completely different. And it's also what kind of possibilities do we have, or what's our language, or what are the templates that we can use in a way. And,
Yes, thinking about this question of authenticity, I think maybe it's also a connection with your film. For us, it's very, we never try to have like actors or people who are going to act the role. I mean, in the beginning of the film, they are restaging a film about the Weather Underground, and it's not about them, being the Weather Underground or acting like these political figures. It's, I think for us, very often we want our performers to be on stage as somehow performers from now, Werner Hesch, Gingerbook, Takahashi, coming to this setting with their own background and their own history, etc., and creating connections with other figures, and like assembling different kind of elements that create the whole setting of the film. And and I was seeing some connection with your actress, who is so much emphasizing the method of acting and what it means, how you use these methods to make a connection to figures, for example.
Right. So I think I'll just wrap up by saying that what I'll take away from this again and again is thinking more about the way in which the notion of reality, the core, the self, the authentic is almost like used propaganda-like within contemporary art, within popular culture, and I mean since the 70s and Deleuze and so on, philosophically that has been questioned, but I still feel that there's a trap in the news as well to make this distinction between the self and the fake, which, if you really think about it, the authentic is just like a constantly oscillating reflection of itself that never reflects a real core. And I think I'll take that away from the discussion we had, also from the film screening, which was trying to address some of these issues through the notion of the voice that comes from you, yet the language that is in a way learned and trained, and the voice that comes from the off screen or from someone else's body. And I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for staying, and thank you very much to Pauline Boudry and Karolin Meunier. Thank you very much.